the men and women of America's armed forces. We revere them for their service. We celebrate them in our communities. And we recognize there are few things nobler than putting on the uniform of your country. In fact, you'd be hard-pressed to find any other institution that Americans respect as much as the military. Which is why it's a little weird that no one wants to join anymore. In an age where Americans don't seem to agree on anything, there's at least one big exception: the U.S. military. In 2023, while Americans' faith in almost all of our major institutions was in steep decline, 60% of us still said we had confidence in the armed forces. Not only was that higher than virtually any other institution, it was also around double the levels for traditionally beloved organizations like public schools or churches. So, the good news? We all kind of agree. The U.S. military is worthy of our respect, and the people who serve are heroes. The bad news? For a growing number of Americans, service in the military, no matter how laudable, has become something for other people to do. Those aren't our words, by the way. That's former Secretary of Defense Robert Gates. And once you look at the data, you can see what he means. In 2023, the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force all failed to meet their recruiting goals. The Marines did fine, by the way, because, come on. But those recruitment shortfalls are part of a broader trend. More and more of the work of keeping America safe is being done by fewer and fewer people. Why? Well, there are several reasons. For one, a lot of people can't make the cut. In 2022, the military estimated that among youths aged 17 to 24, 77% would be disqualified from military service, with some of the most common reasons being drug use, medical conditions, or being overweight. 44% were disqualified for 2 or more such causes. For another, a lot of America's youth just aren't interested. In recent years, 87% of young people said they were unlikely to serve. Only 12% believed that they shared a lot in common with members of the military. And a majority assumed that military service would leave them with physical, psychological, or emotional issues. And while those are all real risks of service, a veteran might tell you that it's a pretty incomplete picture of military life. But here's the thing, a lot of these young people don't know any veterans. Whereas in 1995, 40% of youth had a parent who had served in the military, by 2017, that number had dropped to 15%. And that might be part of the reason why 75% of youths have little to no knowledge about the Army, or why only 27% of them are able to name all the branches of the military. Although, let's be honest, that last one's also a little about the Coast Guard. So, where does that leave us? With a fighting force that is too often invisible to big swaths of the country. If you're very rich or very poor, chances are you don't have much exposure to the military, which is disproportionately populated by people from the middle class. If you're from the Northeast or parts of the upper Midwest, you're far less likely to have ties to the military than someone from the South, where rates of military enlistment can be up to 3 times higher. And if you don't have a family member who served, it's a lot less likely that you will. Nearly 80% of new recruits have at least one close family member who's been in the military. Those are just some of the reasons that some scholars have taken to referring to the population that tends to join the armed forces as a warrior caste, virtually a separate part of American society. And there are some pretty major consequences to having the military made up of such a narrow slice of the country. For one thing, it means that many of us don't actually understand that much about how the military works, or the lives of the people who serve in it. But for another, it means that one of the biggest virtues of military service is going largely unnoticed. It's an incredible engine for social mobility. In fact, despite stereotypes to the contrary, pay for military officers is higher than for over 3/4 of comparable civilians. And for enlisted members, it's higher than for 85% of their private sector equivalents. And everywhere you look, you see powerful evidence of how the military changes people's trajectories. Poverty rates for veterans are about half of what they are for the rest of the population. They have higher rates of home ownership, and their incomes are higher as well. The effect is so pronounced that the Brookings Institution has referred to military service as one of the last bastions of middle-class social mobility. And for some groups in particular, the difference is eye-poppingly large. Hispanic veterans have household incomes nearly 60% higher than their non-veteran counterparts. The benefit to black veterans is so pronounced that it almost entirely closes the wage gap that's typically found between black and white workers. And look, here's the thing. Most people who sign up don't do it to improve their economic outlook. They do it for love of country, which is one more reason they deserve our thanks. Americans are fortunate to have such dedicated defenders. And we're also fortunate to live in a country where military service can put so many people on track to a better life. Even if it's in the Coast Guard. We're joking about that, by the way. We're acutely aware they could kick our asses.